What's up, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the Burress Law, Life, and Friends podcast. I'm super excited today to have my good buddy and attorney, Shawn Tuma, on the show.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here, and love what you're doing with this podcast, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, thank you very much. I want to make sure that I introduce you properly. You are a partner with the national law firm of Spencer Fane. Fane. Okay. All right. You are a cybersecurity expert.
I'm happy when other people want to call me that. Yeah. So I deal with cybersecurity law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us what that involves.
Okay. So it involves a lot. There's a cybersecurity and privacy, really. They're the two areas of law that I deal with. They work together hand in hand. Most of what we hear about with consumers deals with privacy, their personal information. Most of what we hear about with companies deals with cybersecurity, the protection of their networks. You can't have privacy without cybersecurity because that's how you protect personal information, right? So my practice, I've been doing cyber law since 1999, got into it with Y2K, went nowhere, but it got my foot in the door, and I've been kind of evolving ever since. Today, most of my work involves doing incident response. So it's serving as breach counsel or a breach quarterback or, incident response coach, whatever the word of the day is to describe it. But it is helping companies when they have some sort of a cyber attack or incident of that nature, coaching them through that process.
And sometimes it's not even companies. Sometimes it's like cities or municipalities, correct?
Absolutely. It's municipalities. It's any organization, really, at any level. I mean, we just got a new case in yesterday involving a municipality up north part of the country. There's people might remember, August of 2019, when we had, I think, 23 Texas municipalities get hit at once. I believe there may have been some even close to us that may have felt the impact of a ransomware attack. So that's a big part of my practice, is guiding companies through that. And then the other side of that is the risk management side, helping companies prepare ahead of time before they have this problem so that they can learn how to better protect themselves, so that they can understand their risks, prepare for them. And then there's also a litigation component in there as well. A lot of times we have insiders doing inappropriate things with information. We have competitors stealing information, stuff like that.
So I think we take it in this order. First, let's talk about when everything has hit the fan. Let's talk about that incident response. Number one, maybe some examples of the incidents, and then how you respond to it. And then, at the end, let's kind of hit what are some best practices that companies big and small can do to mitigate their risk on the front end.
Sure. That's a great way to approach it. So we're going to scare them up front. That's right.
That way we can talk them into spending money to mitigate the risk.
That's right.
Does it make sense?
You scare them, and then you show them the way to help avoid some of that. And a lot of it is basic education. It's not terribly expensive, but people don't understand. They don't appreciate what their risks are. So if they don't understand them, they don't know how to protect against them, right? The biggest threat today that companies face is ransomware. And that is where, a company gets hit by a cyber attacker. We call them threat actors. And they get into your environment in some manner, and they launch malware that encrypts your entire network, all the data on your network, all your computers, everything, and literally holds them hostage until you pay their ransom. And just this week, Acer Computer Company.
Acer,
you would think they're a sophisticated company, right? Probably don't have to worry about this. They got hit with a ransomware. Their demand was $50 million to pay the extortionists to get the decryptors to decrypt, what was encrypted. And it's a precarious process because we're dealing with criminals, right? So you don't want to go paying $50 million to the criminals without having some assurances that the money you're paying, which will be paid in Bitcoin, so once it's paid, it's gone.
Right.
Will that they're going to do what they say, and there's a very detailed process that we go through and how we handle that whole incident response process. But what it means for a company is you're shut down. You're out of business.
Yeah. All right. There's a couple things I want to hit, at least eventually in this talk. You say they're criminals. I'm not sure that most of them think they're criminals.
Man, that is a great point. And most people don't pick up on this issue.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
That's exactly right. So for good reason.
And if you believe that, I have oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona.
Sounds good. Yeah. So they don't see themselves as criminals. A lot of these people are in third world type countries. They're in Eastern European countries that have very little opportunity. They don't have jobs. They have a laptop and a tent on the side of a mountain somewhere with an internet connection. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit there. They have some sort of a shelter or whatever, but they don't have much. And they view what they're doing is taking, kind of like, Robin Hood, taking from those that have to provide for themselves, their family, their country. A lot of them are in China, and in China, they view the duty to your country.
But there's another group. That feels like they are improving the security for certain companies, right? So it's their job to try to break in so that whether it's the U.S. government or whoever it is, they can then make their infrastructure more secure. So but they wouldn't be asking for money.
They're not doing ransomware.
Right.
So those are what we call, they call themselves security researchers, where they go out and they're just running these scans. They're trying to find ways to get into companies. And if they're successful, that's sometimes what differentiates whether they're a criminal or a threat actor from a true security researcher. A security researcher may be operating under that company's bug bounty program, where they'll disclose the vulnerability and then get paid based upon the preset pricing.
They could be paid by the government
or by the company. So companies will have a bug bounty program where they say, hey, come try to get in. And if you get in successfully, we'll pay you.
Any particular names of companies that have done this?
Tesla does.
Wow.
Tesla does. A lot of big companies have them. But the other side of that is, I've always kind of said, I think everybody's a security researcher until they hit the right company or the right amount of data and get a big enough payout to go retire to an island somewhere, and then they decide not to be a security researcher.
Yeah, or potentially buy the island.
Or buy the island, That's right. So there's a very fine line there on whether they are or are not security researchers or criminals just using that as a pretext.
So again, what we're talking about here, we're talking about companies big and small who are targeted by these individuals. They break in. They literally hold the company hostage. The company cannot do business. And we today are talking to the guy who knows probably as much about this topic as anyone in the country. That's fantastic. And I'm curious, where did this interest come? How did you decide to become a subject matter expert?
So it started in law school. My second year of law school, I was the editor-in-chief of our law review and our, whatever you call them, supervisor, professor.
Which law school?
Regent University in Virginia. He came to me and he said, Shawn, I want to do a class, if you will, like a self-study type class, because I'd had my student article published. And he said, I want you to take a whole semester, find an issue that's going to be hot after you graduate, and start becoming an expert on it now. And then write a publishable article, a law review article, so that when you graduate, you can go publish it and start building up some credibility. And this was in 1998, and my topic was Y2K. And so I studied all the Y2K legislation, the problem, and I had zero technical background. I was a history, political science guy, no technical background, but that was kind of the issue that I thought would be coming.
All right, so hang on, just for the younger folks like my little boy, let's talk about Y2K. He's not going to know what that means.
Okay, so this was back in the olden days. Computer memory was very expensive. And so to save on memory, instead of using a 4-digit number for the year, like 2021, they only used 2 digits because it took up a lot less memory. And so it would have been 21. Well, in 1998, 1997, they started thinking, hey, wait a minute. In just a couple of years, we have this 2000 coming up, and all of our computers are going to say 00 and think it's the 1900s, and they're going to shut down. And so the fear was that all the computer networks would come crashing down, that airplanes would be falling out of the sky because everything that was run by computers would fail.
Everybody thought this.
Oh, yeah,
this was
everybody.
all over the news. It was like when the clock strikes midnight and we are at the year 2000, we're not sure if anything's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a White House commission that was created to deal with this problem, and there was a huge concern with it. And interestingly enough, I had lunch one time, coffee, with the fellow who was the head of the White House program in charge of dealing with Y2K. And I asked him what was different between that and cybersecurity. And he said, well, number one, it was a problem to fix, not active people doing battle against you. So you don't have an active participant on the other side.
That makes sense.
But number two, the public and private sector came together all as one to do battle against this problem and work hand in hand. And he said, we've never seen that kind of cooperation really, on another issue like this. So who knows why it worked. But anyway, so let me tell you the great part about this. You're going to love this because I've already told you my fear of public speaking, right? I was scared to even be a litigation attorney because of my fear of speaking in public.
We've had these conversations in the past. Yes.
Yeah, so I graduate law school. I write this article. I send it out to the Texas law reviews and got several offers to publish. And then Texas Tech said, so this was in like summer of 99 as I'm studying for the bar exam. Texas Tech came back and said, hey, look, we'll publish it, but we're also doing this symposium on technology. We would like for you to come speak at it as well. I was like, oh my God, this is great. This is my rocket ship to stardom and early retirement and all this stuff, right? So I don't even have my license yet. I'm still waiting to start as a real attorney at the law firm I was at. And so I accepted the publication and to go speak. And then I was at a firm called Vile Hamilton.
I clerked there.
Did you? Yeah. Well, this was in 99 when I started as an attorney.
Let's take a brief detour. This is my entrance into the legal profession. I clerked there. They had like 75 lawyers. By the time I finished clerking that summer, they had 32 lawyers.
Great. Okay. So I clerked there as a second year. So in the summer of 98, I clerked there and there were about 150 lawyers. And I got an offer to come back, permanent employment, and I accepted it. And on the day of the Super Bowl of 1999, I start getting calls. So this is my last year of law school. I'm in Virginia planning to come to Texas. I start getting calls from other clerks saying, have you heard the news? The firm is like now down to 90 attorneys and they're rescinding offers to the incoming attorneys. And of course I'm panicking. I had 3 kids at the time and, didn't know what I was going to do. turns out my offer stayed and I was there for a year. But anyway, so I get there. And
who was the guy, before we get into it, who was the guy that knew more about the Texas Rangers than
Jamie? Oh, what's his last name? Jamie?
I mean, you're right. I know it's Jamie.
I think he has a podcast.
But the guy knows more about baseball than like anybody else ever.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was all he really talked about.
Jamie. He's been on The Ticket. Anyway.
Jamie Newberg.
The Newberg is called the Newberg Report. Yeah. He was one of the coolest guys there.
Super nice guy.
There were not a lot of cool things about Val Hamilton. Jamie Newberg was one of the cool guys.
Really
and there was this old guy named Byron Henry. You remember Byron?
Byron Henry. That's not the
Byron. Not Byron Henry. Not Byron Henry. Byron Hanspart. Byron. It was an older guy.
Yeah, I don't remember him.
Okay. Well, he wasn't as cool as Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie was cool. So anyway, then in the fall, all the insurance companies that Val Hamilton represented, which were a lot, started realizing they had Y2K issues. Nobody at Val Hamilton knew anything about Y2K. So baby lawyer Shawn, that didn't have a license, starts getting invited to all these client meetings and pitches to go talk about this stuff, right? And so, man, I'm on cloud nine. I'm like, this is freaking awesome, And it goes and goes. And so Y2K comes and goes and nothing happened. All right. Nothing happened. Like literally nothing happened.
But it could have.
It could have. And so I still had a talk I had to go give. So on April 1st, April Fool's Day
all days
of 2000, I had to get on a plane and fly to Lubbock, Texas, and speak for an hour about Y2K litigation that did not exist. It was so bad that literally, this was before smartphones, right? People were putting their heads down on the table and going to sleep. I can still see the visual of it today. This room full of lawyers, my very first time ever speaking in public like this, and they're putting their heads down and literally going to sleep because all I could say is, but it still could happen. There's still a chance.
They should have at least changed it and had you speak on Y3K.
Man, it was so bad. The law students, I'm a year ahead of them. I had just graduated. So they come up afterwards and they like walk me off the stage and they're like, you okay? I'm like so shaken. I'm just stunned. And they're like, you know what? Your flight's not for a few hours. Let's take you to our favorite bar and just kind of have a few drinks. It was so horrendous. But that's what led to this. So that went nowhere. I got into the issue of internet contracting. Could you have a valid contract over the internet? Didn't know at that time. I published a couple of law review articles on that, took some positions, got cited by a couple of courts. Things were looking good. And then this thing called the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act came out and said, well, of course you can. Move on. Next issue. So all that went nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was doing litigation. I was at Winstead by this time. And
another big firm.
Yeah, I was a litigator there. And I kind of was feeling pretty dejected about it. So I wrote an article about Judge Roy Bean, which was a fun article, had nothing to do with cyber or tech. And then got a series of cases dealing with insider fraud, accounting fraud. And I started thinking, man, there should be a law against using computers to do this kind of stuff. There is, there was already one. And so I did a deep dive into that, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and spent several years kind of studying and developing an expertise in that. And then realized for every misuse of computer, somebody's data is being impacted. What about them? The privacy concerns. And then that's where the whole data breach stuff came in. And so around the mid-2000s, got on the whole data breach side and got ahead of that, if you will. And thought 2011 it was supposed to be the year of the data breach. Turned out not to be. I had a few cases I was handling back then, though, that were kind of getting my toe in the water of it. And then when the whole Target, Home Depot, everything in 2013 hit, the dam busted open at that point.
Yeah.
And so that's what led to this.
Yeah, because I remember being a little bit worried about you because I just remember thinking when we met, because we've known each other a while, and I remember thinking, golly, you're like you're a subject matter expert on this, but how do you monetize it? You know, we
had those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird, and it's hard to even find an analogy, but it's just like it's like being, you know, the best in the world at, you know, kickboxing that used to be on ESPN, but like nobody's paying. You know, it was a weird, you know, and it was like, and you just kind of needed the market to come.
I did. And now I'm glad I did it the way I did. I had a coach, a guy named Cordell Parvin, who really helped me with a lot of things along the way on figuring out, because I used to love writing law review articles, and I think I've written 8 or 9 maybe. and Cordell would tell me, he's like, Shawn, you write these because you like them. I was like, no, they're for business development. He's like, nobody's ever going to read this crap. No, they're not. You write them because you like them, you know? And he said, wouldn't you rather get paid? I was like, whoa, that really hurt, you know, but it was true. Nobody's reading that stuff, you know? And that's when he got me to start blogging around 2011, 2012.
Yeah, and you've done a great job with that.
Yeah. So it's just, but in hindsight, I think a better marketing approach for what I was doing would have been to become a subject matter expert in an industry where you've got a known client base rather than a legal issue where you don't have that direct market to go to. And I really just got lucky that, you know, I picked right that time and adapted, and there was a lot of adaptation in there. But
so let's we've gone around our elbow to get to our thumb over here. Let's talk about those incidents.
This is like a 6-hour podcast,
yeah,
right?
It is. Hit the incidents. Let's talk about, I mean, you're, you know, big company, small company. I mean, what happens? Give us some examples. Give us some of the sexy stories.
Yeah. So, you know, I tell you, one of the sexiest was a large cancer hospital, not the one everybody's thinking about, but one pretty big, where I was speaking at a annual meeting at the state bar, and I literally got off the stage. It was on a Friday. I looked at my phone and I had urgent call, you know, a message. And so I went out to the parking lot, and this cancer facility had gotten hit with ransomware, and it had literally shut down their entire operations. So that's pretty scary. I mean, they had no ability to treat. They had no ability to know what treatments had been given. Everything was encrypted. And so I go to the parking lot. I call the point person for the company, which was their chief privacy officer. And I said, all right, look, here's what we need to do. You know, first you got to hire me. You know, we got to get the retention agreement in place so I can legally represent you. Second, we need to get a call with a security forensics firm. We can do that in the next 20 minutes. Third, we're going to need to get interim security measures deployed in your environment because obviously something didn't work out right or you wouldn't have been hit, you know. And I said, and then we need to begin negotiating with the threat actor and determine what they're demanding. And I think back then it was around $1 million. This was several years ago, which was astronomical for that time. And the guy's like, he sounded like the stoned surfer dude. He's like, yeah, man. Yeah, it's Friday. You know, we don't really have all the manpower to do all this. Why don't we have a call on Monday? I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, this is not anything to play around with. I mean, this is serious stuff, you know? And he's just like, nah, yeah, we can't get everybody on the call, and we'll just take us some time. I'm just like stunned.
CEO of the year.
Yeah, I'm just standing there in shock. And so, I like did everything I could to express to him how critical it was that we move right now and do everything this is the most important issue you've got, right? And he wasn't having it. And so they dilly-dallied around, didn't get me hired till the next week, didn't get any of the professionals in that we had recommended. And then the following week, I was on vacation with my family. And so we're out there. We had a beach house. I'm sitting on the deck, and I get a call from, because I'm peppering him the whole time. I'm like, hey, come on, we need to get together. We need to get moving. And we did get the security firm in, and they needed to deploy all their endpoint monitoring to see if this threat actor was still active in the environment. I remember they had backups. So they had backup data. And so that's why he wasn't too concerned. He's like, we'll just get it restored. Okay. Right. And then he said, well, we don't have the ability to get all the endpoints installed. And so we're just going to have to wait. And I'm like, we can bring people in to do this. We've got people at arm's length to call in to come do it. Well, dilly-dallied along. And so I'm sitting there and I start getting calls from him then. And I'm like, all right, man, what's going on? And I'm like, no hurry to you. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. And he said, well, the FBI just left. I was like, oh, okay, what'd they have to say? He said, well, this hacker group, which was known as the Dark Overlord, they were the really bad guys at that time. They were nasty. And they were one of the first ones that not only encrypted, but they stole data. So they had stolen research data for all these big pharmaceutical companies that they were doing research for, and were posting this proprietary research data on Pastebin on the internet and tweeting out links to it, tagging the companies that it belonged to, like whatever big pharma. And so needless to say, this got this guy's attention, right? Because now we weren't just dealing with a ransomware response. We got the FBI involved. Thank God. I always try to get law enforcement in when I can. And now we've got many attorneys for big pharma companies coming in saying, we've got a little problem here. And it was just really nasty. And the problem is all of that could have been prevented on day one if we would have done what we typically do, and that's marshal all our resources. We usually work through the night, through the weekends, whatever, and get that environment secured and make sure the bad guys are out. So,
okay, so the bad guys, who are they in general?
Usually they're from other countries. Usually they're from Eastern Europe, more often than not. We're seeing a lot from Iran. We're seeing a lot from North Korea, a lot from Russia, and a lot from China. Russia is typically not running as much ransomware because their motivation for hacking is usually political, to try to do disinformation. A lot of times, like we see here in the U.S. quite frequently. But they do have spin-off groups that are tied loosely to their state government that are running ransomware campaigns.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Typically, is this state sponsored or not?
Not usually. Ransomware is not, but there are North Korean groups that are known to be, and there are Iranian groups that are known to be. And so part of the problem is before you can pay a ransom to these guys, number one, you got to do it through Bitcoin. And you have to get something called OFAC clearance through the Department of Treasury, Office of Financial Assets Controls. And what that means is the Department of Treasury places terrorist groups, countries with sanctions like North Korea, Iran, on this list and said, you are prohibited from negotiating or doing business with them. If you do, you will violate federal law. So paying a ransom to them would be a violation of federal law. So you've got to go through and get clearance to do your diligence to hopefully make sure it's not one of those prohibited groups.
And then why are these people doing what they're doing? Is it always just money, or?
Usually ransomware is about money. Okay. A lot of the data breach stuff, and ransomwares, we're finding more and more where they're not only encrypting the data, they're stealing it and they're re-extorting you with the threat to publish. So ransomwares are considered data breaches, like in healthcare. HIPAA presumes a ransomware attack is a data breach. You got to disprove that through a pretty complicated process. But ransomware is usually money. Data breaches, a lot of times, it can be any number of things. Stealing corporate intelligence. Years back, we saw China behind the attack on the Office of Personnel Management of the U.S. government, which had the files of every person on the government payroll, including secret, blacklist personnel, contractors, all that. After a few years, you start seeing connections where those people are being found and stuff like that. A lot of people think maybe their motivation in stealing that information was to find where our assets are, and then know how to go to them and compromise them and get, whatever they want. So there can be any number of reasons. There's also what we call cause hacking, or these people that have like a social cause. A company's not doing the right socially responsible thing or whatever. They'll come in and start trying to hack them, and publish negative information. I mean, Sony was the first company we saw that happen to back in 2014 when they got the CEO's emails. And so they launched a ransomware attack. They bricked their whole network. And then they got the CEO's emails, and we're seeing where the CEO was like making disparaging comments about then President Barack Obama, like pretty bad ones. And on the same day, he was going to a fundraiser to have like dinner and donate money, and so you see, they're use this stuff for Ashley Madison. Man, that was a big one, where they stole the data of all these people trying to have affairs. Life is short, have an affair.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw people committing suicide after that.
Wow. So when this happens, I mean, it seems like there's two things that could happen. Either you pay or you kick out the bad guys and secure the network. I'm not hearing a whole lot about kicking out the bad guys, securing the network. I'm hearing more about paying.
So there are a couple of scenarios. Number one, you always want to kick out the bad guys. So our first step is always to get in a true professional security firm that does nothing but very high-level, sophisticated cybersecurity. Get them in, kick out the bad guys, and ensure that the network's secure. The next step is, do you have backups of your data? If you have backups of your data and you can restore, then you don't need to pay. You can restore your data from your backups. The problem is most companies, and I say companies now, I mean from solo law firms, one-man shop, to small health practices, to accounting firms, to manufacturing firms. It runs the entire gamut. Nobody is immune from this. Most of them have their backup set to do an automatic backup, right? They're not going in and plugging in a drive and unplugging it at the end of the day. Well, the feature that allows them to do the automatic backup means it's connected to the network. And these hackers have learned the first thing they do when they get in your environment is they go find your backups. And they either forensically delete them or they encrypt them first before they encrypt your network. And so most companies don't have backups because they think they do, but the hackers have already taken them out. They know that's the impediment to them getting paid, and so they take out the backups first.
So unless they're a client of yours, what do you think about OneDrive, Microsoft?
I think OneDrive's fine. And it depends on how much data you have. Cloud backup services are usually better off than, like an on-premises backup. But the better solution is to have like a multi-factor login between your network and that cloud backup, where you got to like enter a password and then get a code, something, click on a text message or whatever to say, yes, this really is me.
Is that the two-factor authentication?
Two-factor authentication. And anybody that's using Microsoft Office 365 absolutely must be using two-factor authentication. If they are not, they will get hit with what we call business email compromise. That's where somebody gets your username, password, and starts sending invoices and intercepting invoices and payments and all that stuff. It happens all the time. It's
scary. I mean, I'm the guy, I'm kind of the point man where something will come in, I'll see it, and it'll be like, it looks like it's from us and it's to us. And it's like, click on, I've had the craziest things happen. An email that looks like it's from me to my CPA asking for a wire transfer. Mm-hmm. And by the grace of God, she texts me on my mobile phone and says, hey, I just got a text from you saying to wire $100,000 for a case. Is that what you really want to do? I'm like, no. But so I will send this to our team and go, do not click. If you get this email, do not click on this. It's tricky. It's very tricky.
It is. And so phishing emails, that's what we would call a phishing email. They are one of the top causes of all breaches, all cyber incidents. And that includes ransomware, business email, data breach, all of it. But what you just described is having a control in place, right? So your CPA said, I'm not going to trust this first message. I'm going to go through a second level and I'm going to call or I'm going to text and say, hey, is this really what you want to do? Everybody needs those kind of controls in place now when you're dealing with money.
And I have that deal with my bank too. My bank knows when there's a wire transfer request, they call my cell. They have to talk to me. And then I have to, and our bank's like 100 yards away, but I have to go to the bank in person.
That's smart. That's smart. You should do that. And note you said call your cell. So they already know your number. Mm-hmm. Don't call a number that's in the email, because that number in that email is going to be the bad guy. It's going to be like, yeah, this is Jason. Yeah, wire the money. Bye. Yeah, I'm in a hurry. I'm getting on a plane. I got to go.
Right.
And that kind of thing. And so you've got to have those type of controls in place. And I can't tell you how many cases we deal with where people don't. And so I'll get a call. I actually got I got two people on the opposite side of one case trying to retain me a year ago. There was a couple. It was. I was in a little bit of a quandary on how do I deal with this.
You're just going to pay more money.
Well, how do I decline? I knew at that point because they both sent emails describing the event.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, crap, this is the same case, And I'm like, number one, my advice on all of these is you need to just work out a resolution, because you're going to spend more money fighting about it in most cases than you're going to ever recover. But number two, I'm sitting there going, how do I decline these without stating I've been contacted by the other? Because no lawsuit had been filed, but they were both considering lawsuits, right? And that's a strategic advantage if you know that. And so I didn't want to give that away. And so I went to our, risk management committee and said, hey, I had this happen. How do I deal with it? And they were like, you just need to send a one line thing saying, I am declining this representation, period. No explanation, no nothing. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
But we, it's where somebody gets in an email account, they intercept an invoice, they get a fraudulent payment, it's sent to some bad guys, and then one side's going, I paid it, and the other side's going, well, I didn't get paid. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. And I always tell people when I get a call on that, which one of the parties is using Microsoft Office 365 that does not have two-factor authentication.
Wow.
Because whichever one that is, that's whose it is. 99% of the time we found that. Because with Office 365, it's just like Google. It's like Gmail. All you do is go to a web browser and type in username and password.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? People reuse their username and passwords all the time. And when you see a company that has a breach, many times like LinkedIn in 2012, they got their username and password database for everybody who was on LinkedIn. So it had their email and it had their password in plain text. They now have applications that'll run these billions a second or, whatever against the logins. And then they find a successful one and they go in. And so they don't have to be coming for you in particular. It's like phishing, just cast. But that's why you don't reuse username and passwords.
So let's focus on small firms, small companies, since that's probably the majority of the audience. Other than the two-factor authentication, what are best practices that we can do to mitigate these risks?
Okay, so a big problem we're seeing right now with small practices, small firms, small companies, is they hire a managed service provider, an IT company that says, we'll take care of everything for you, just pay us. Right now, I've always been a big fan of this because you get good service, at a fractional cost. Unfortunately, a lot of IT companies today are not terribly savvy on what's happening out here. And so we're seeing the IT companies get hacked. And then they use their tools to go out and attack all of their customers. So they get the IT company, they use their management tool to attack all their customers. So you got to deal with a really good, reputable IT company that has high cyber insurance, and I'd say, several million in coverage at least. And it's not going to help you a whole lot because you should have your own cyber insurance. Everybody should. But it at least shows they appreciate the risk and they're taking it seriously.
So I need to look at for our law firm, I need to look at our commercial policy and make sure that we've got adequate cyber insurance coverage.
Yeah. Your commercial policy is not going to provide cyber insurance most of the time. Your commercial general liability. Okay. You need a separate cyber endorsement for cyber and privacy risk. Number two, you need to make sure you know who you can use as legal counsel if you ever have an incident under that policy, because a lot of these policies are very specific in who they allow you to use. And oftentimes it's people you don't know. So when you're getting your policy, say, this is who I want to use, and write
Shawn Tuma, Spencer Fane.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Or someone you know.
Well, basically Shawn Tuma, Spencer Fane.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. But right. So the next step, you got to vet your service provider because they're causing a lot of problems.
The service providers who?
That's the internet service company, internet IT company.
Okay.
Not internet, your information
as bad as AT&T. No, we're not talking about AT&T.
No.
Okay, got it.
So next step, your backups. The remedy to a ransomware attack is good backups.
Okay.
You got to use something like what we call the 3-2-1 backup policy. That's where you have three backup copies of your data. There are at least in two different formats. So you may have one that's a hard drive, one that's a tape drive, or something like that, and one that's stored offsite or is completely disconnected from the internet. Now, you may not do this daily. It may be weekly. It may be monthly. But just understand that one copy may be all you're left with at the end of the day.
Man, I've really learned something here because we stopped doing that about 2 years ago. And I've got a 20 plus year Microsoft guy. He's employed by Microsoft to this day who manages ours. But we pulled the plug on that separate, not connected. And I think we should probably put that back in place and download it every month.
Every month. That way, at least if worst case scenario, you've got all your data except the last month, which you can probably recreate from other sources.
Yeah, for sure.
I would definitely recommend that. At least discuss the issue with him and make sure he knows and he's thinking about it, because a lot of these folks, they're just not engaged. IT is different from security. IT is making stuff happen, facilitating your network, making it work. Security is protecting against things happening. Think marketing, making stuff happening, legal, stopping bad things from happening. That's the relationship. So you got to get your backups covered. Number 2, we've talked about the multi-factor authentication, the 2-step. Put that on anything that means anything to you. Bank accounts, LinkedIn account, website, firm login, email, database where you store information, family pictures, whatever. Put that 2-factor authentication. It virtually stops password hacking because it just makes it too hard. Next step, and maybe the most important, is do not use RDP access to your network. That's remote desktop protocol. That's where you go to something and you just log in and it takes you straight into your desktop. That RDP access gives an open window, if you will, or an open portal to the internet. And people, unsophisticated IT people, think, oh, I just changed the port number and nobody will ever find it. They don't know that the bad guys have tools that are called port scanners and other scanning tools that scan the entire network looking for these open portals and running malware against them. So they don't have to know you're there. They'll find you. You got to get rid of remote desktop access, remote desktop protocol, RDP. Everybody started using it when the pandemic hit with work from home. You need to use a VPN, virtual private network from a reputable company with multi-factor login, the 2-step login to get into it. That is a much more secure solution. And when we see ransomware cases on a mid to smaller size organization, so 250 employees or less, we can almost guarantee they were using RDP access. And that's how the bad guys got in.
Got it.
That's how prevalent it is.
You have probably given more speeches on this kind of topic, but I mean, you've probably given more speeches than just about anybody in the last 10 years that I can think of, correct?
I've given a bunch. In 2017, I gave 47 speeches.
Unbelievable. We are totally out of time. I'm gonna ask you to come back in a bit, 3, 4, 5 months. I want you back because I think it's an entire topic. We had a great conversation about this, but I think when you're giving as many speeches as you are, I mean, you've got a lot of advice on, because it scares most of us to death.
It scares me to death.
Well, you come back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
Has this been fun? I think
this is fun. Yeah.
I want you to come back so we can talk about, not too personal, but speeches. Let's talk about some fun stuff next time. I think you can really help the folks out there who have to get up in front of people and talk. It's one of the hardest things to do.
It is.
You're on record saying you'll come back.
I absolutely will.
All right.
I think it'd be fun. And yeah, it's something I've struggled with a lot. People don't understand it and they don't appreciate it, but I'm very introverted. And I'm scared to death of speaking in public. And it's so bad that it influenced my law school career. It's why I did not want to be a litigator in law school, because I was so scared of it. Didn't take moot court, didn't do any of that kind of stuff because I was scared to speak in public. And now, and it's still a struggle to gear up and get ready.
I love it because I have the same problem. I love a good part two.
Yeah.
All right. You're coming back. But until then, if somebody wants help on risk management on the front end before something terrible happens or incident response, how do they find you?
I'm a hard guy to find. Just type in Shawn Tuma.
Shawn Tuma with a W.
No, never mind. Don't type that. Okay, you might get some other stuff. No, go to my Spencer Fane website. www.spencerfane.com, or you can go to LinkedIn and type Shawn Tuma, or you can go to my blog, ShawnTuma.com, Twitter, Facebook, got a blog page, Instagram, you name it, I'm out there. So.
I mean, we have brought you a knockdown expert on the subject matter at hand, cybersecurity, data privacy. It has been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. I knew I would enjoy it. It's been great.
Yep, I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for the time.
Appreciate it, man.
All right. Yep. We'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed it.